All right, everybody, welcome to Emily Knows Everything. This is a very special episode. I was very fortunate to be connected with this very rare consultant. His name is Sam Mangel, and I would say I've never met anyone that has a career like you, Sam. He does federal prison consulting, and he's the guy that you call when you want a pardon. And right now, I'm sure your phone is ringing off the hook.
Well, thank you very much. And I always tell people when they ask what I do, I explain to them, I'm the guy you never want to have to call. Uh, just given my profession and everybody who calls me, or their family, it's because you're in trouble with the federal government. And other than one person in my whole career, everyone else is wound up found guilty as a felon, and most of them do go to federal prison. Under normal circumstances, I'm very busy. These days, since the new administration, I probably get two or three phone calls a day about clemency, which is, encompasses pardons and commutations.
So you said you used to be busier.
No, no, no. I'm normally very, very busy. But now that the new administration came on, and certainly we knew that the president would be offering clemency, pardons, and commutations to the J6 folks. But then after that, and to the extent that he's continuing very aggressively, and in my opinion, in most, if not all of these cases, rightly so, offering clemency, which includes both pardon and commutation. And if you or your viewers don't understand the difference of the two, we can go into that. But
I
he
don't
has taken
understand.
Sure. So, clemency is an umbrella, which is the act of forgiveness. And in the federal criminal system, only the president of the United States is able to offer clemency to those convicted or accused of a federal crime, not civil, but a federal crime.
So, Sam, let's talk about how you got into this. You one time were in prison.
Yes, I was. In
Sorry to,
2018,
that's the elephant in the room, guys.
no, that's okay. It's my street cred.
Yeah.
In 2016, I was charged with wire fraud, hired an extremely expensive lawyer in Philadelphia. $500,000 later, my attorney, who promised me I was getting home confinement or probation, didn't tell me how to work with the judge or understand the system at all. I stood in front of the judge. I apologized, which I thought I had to do. And I just remember this judge in April of 2018 staring down at me from the bench and saying, Mr. Mangel, you're no different than any vagrant on the street. You're actually worse. You should have known what you did. You accepted no responsibility what you did. And that's after the prosecutor also recommended probation.
So saying
I'm
sorry
going,
wasn't the move.
no, absolutely. Well, in my case, it clearly wasn't credible. And to be honest, I didn't believe it. I got up and just said some words,
You didn't mean it.
things that I didn't, and I didn't prepare properly.
Got it.
Everything that I tell my clients now, I didn't do. Not only did he give me a 5-year sentence, and I thought I was going to be in prison for 4 years and 2 months, the 85% rule, he remanded me to custody that day. So I was shackled, taken into never in trouble in my life, taken in the bowels of the Philadelphia Detention Center, very similar to where Diddy is at the Metropolitan Detention Center,
The shoe.
and spent 6 weeks in the worst of the worst facility. My cellmate convicted of murder for fentanyl. And so I was eventually shipped down to the camp in Miami, where I learned very quickly the do's and don'ts. And I was out with 21 months. So I learned quite a bit in that ordeal.
Do you feel like you changed a lot as a person being locked up? I mean, it must have changed you.
It definitely made me more humble. I went into this flying high, impenetrable. And when you're in a system that you're a number, I don't care how much money you have, I don't care who you are. My closest, we'll call it a friend while at Miami, was Peter Madoff, Bernie's brother. And
Okay.
you're talking about people that were the pinnacles of society, that were stock traders and successful doctors and lawyers, right down to people that were nonviolent drug offenders that might have been bringing in cocaine in the port of Miami. you realize you wear the same clothes, you buy
Yeah.
the same food, you eat the same food, you sleep on the same mattress, you
You're
have
all
the
the
same
same.
amount of phone time. Right. Everything is the same. The only difference is your federal number. Other than that, you're the same. And it makes you realize and appreciate things in a lot different, in a totally different manner. So now when I go back and visit clients in prison, and I've been back to Miami and visited clients where I used to sit in the visiting room, it's a different appreciation for what they're going through and humility. It's a very humbling experience. And I think, now my wife of now 37 years and my two grown children saw me through it and certainly recognize the change. And I don't care what the verdict is in Sean Combs, or I've got three other clients that are at that facility now. You come out a different person. You have
So
to.
Diddy, they're saying, I've been obviously covering the Diddy trial now since it started on May 5th, and people kind of expected him to be different, and people are saying, "Oh, he's just faking it." He's holding this book called The Magic of Believing, trying to manifest this verdict. It's like, is he actually reading that? And I was thinking, I think he actually is reading that book because that's all he has right now is the power to control his thoughts. Because when you're in that shoe and you're like in confined, what more do you have than hope, right?
Well, he's not in the shoe.
I thought he
Understand?
was in this. He was in the
No,
shoe.
he was. So any high profile inmate, when they
In the
get to the
beginning, he was
detention
in the
center,
shoe.
yes,
Yeah.
but he wasn't in there for trouble or disciplinary. So the shoe, segregated housing, and I was in the shoe for 3 days when I got down to Miami because they lost my paperwork. So there's an administrative part of the shoe that, in his case, and for all of my clients that are high profile that go to the MDC, they typically spend the first 2 or 3 days there under observation. That's really a suicide watch.
You were
You
told
know,
he
you're
was in the shoe and they were tampering with his food in the beginning and that the guards were coming up to him and messing with him. That is what a
no.
prison source told us like last year.
I do not believe anybody was tampering with his food.
Really?
Um, now, could
He's
guards
Diddy.
could guards have taunted him? Absolutely,
They were
no
singing the
question about it.
wrong song. They were like locked up, and it's like not even his song. They thought it was his song.
The BOP and the staff can be mean. They can be cruel. They can be punitive. What do I mean by punitive? Maybe 2 months ago, I had a client that was on the same floor as Diddy. Right now, I think is on 4H or 4W, which is a single tiered floor of typically high profile individuals. What do I mean by single tier? It's not one cell stacked on top of another. Most of the cells are single celled, although he did share a cell with one of my clients for a period of time. But it's people that it tends to be a much calmer environment,
Okay.
and they're there for their own protection. So I had a former foreign government official that was one cell down from him. They're there for their own protection. But when there was a fight and there were stabbings about 2 months ago at the detention center, they locked down the whole facility, his floor included. So the BOP is punitive. If one person does something wrong, it's just easier to lock the whole facility down. So he suffers the same as the gang member that stabbed another gang member 3 floors down, had nothing to do with him. They shut everything down. So it's a terrible place to be. I don't believe anybody was messing with his food.
That was
Um,
reported in the news too.
look, anything is possible. I don't want to say it's
And he was
impossible.
complaining about the food.
Well, the food is not good. I mean,
Yeah.
you're given a certain, ration every day. It's like 2,200 calories. It's the same meal every day of the
What
week.
what's
So
the best part? What's the best meal at prison?
Thursday lunch, you get baked chicken.
Mm.
That is the best meal, in my opinion. And what you saw was typically a lot of guys would not eat their chicken, and they would sell it amongst the other inmates for other commissary food or things like that.
It's that
So
good.
chicken had a very high street value.
Interesting. Well, so
Yes.
okay, your job, you've been getting a lot of phone calls, and one, didn't you get a call about Diddy?
I get calls about
Like,
homes all the time.
so the question now, as we're about to face deliberation next week, if Diddy does end up getting time, could there be a potential that Donald Trump will pardon him? That is what everyone wants to know.
So first, let me say he is not my client. So when I'm speaking, it's based upon my experience in the current environment and what we're saying. I think this administration has taken a very aggressive approach towards clemency, where they feel that the defendant has been wronged by a overzealous prosecution or judge, or an egregious prosecution or judge, or it's politically motivated. I do not think, and this is, I was told by somebody very high in the administration, keeping in mind, who I represented as a consultant, people that are, very either high in the administration or within that inner circle. They are not interested in crimes of violence, sex, child pornography, illegal immigration. Now, that's not to say that the president, for whatever reason, wouldn't consider pardoning someone. I do believe that the president has made a statement that if he feels that Sean Combs or anyone was improperly prosecuted or overcharged, or it was a political charge or environment, that he will step in. And he has to date. And it's my understanding of working with people that are involved in clemency all the time, and work very closely with Alice Johnson, who's the pardon czar, and Ed Martin, who's the pardon attorney, and are very in tune with the environment, that if the president feels that there was a miscarriage of justice or something was done which shouldn't have been, he's going to be very proactive. And I compliment him on that. He's really taking a very hands-on approach to try to correct things early on in the process, not wait for someone to have to serve years and years of their
So
sentence.
maybe it's about it's going to end up coming down to then, based on your answer, of what Diddy would get
Yeah.
convicted on. So if he doesn't get convicted on sex trafficking, and if it's a RICO, do you think a RICO would be something the president would
It
consider?
depends. I think this president is very, in many ways, concerned about what the image would relay to the public. And right now, he is absolutely and rightly flying high because of what happened in the Middle East, and how the economy is churning on. I don't think he wants a negative PR campaign because he would offer clemency to a convicted sex offender or something egregious.
Sounding like you think it'd be too risky of a decision.
Keep in mind that President Trump has gone through, and I think convicted of in a civil court and in a criminal court, a number of charges that had sexual connotations. The E. Jean Carroll case. There are a number of cases that he was involved in that he feels, and many people feel, were politically motivated. Um, Depending upon what Combs, if he's convicted of that, you might see some similarities to what he was convicted of and what the president might have been convicted of. So yes, you might garner some compassion for that because you have a president that went through some of this, much of which he feels was nonsense, and the public feels was politically motivated. And it was done in the same venue, the SDNY or the EDNY, that Combs is going through. And one thing I have learned is that there are certain districts, certainly New York, that this administration feels are overly aggressive and politicized. And in my opinion, that might bode well, depending upon if and what Combs would get convicted of.
So you make a great point. A lot of people are criticizing the SDNY right now, specifically Maureen Comey. They believe that she's overreaching and that the government is simply overreaching. Do you have any feelings on SDNY from your personal experience or your clients?
I have three cases now that we're working on for clemency in the SDNY or EDNY, very, very similar districts, where you see tremendous judicial overreach in these cases, and certainly prosecutors that went above and beyond to punish these three defendants. This happens to be, in my opinion, two of the more aggressive districts in the country, and certainly venues in the country. And what's interesting is the president experienced that.
Wow.
So I think that, again, depending upon the results of or the outcome of the trial, you would certainly see a president that is very well versed in these districts and would, depending upon the outcome, might have a different point of view towards clemency than prior presidents would have.
Why is this district so strict?
So most districts, I wouldn't say strict in that way. They're depending upon the district and the state. Keep in mind the judges tend to be federal judges are typically voted in and chosen based upon the senators in that state as favors to senators. So New York is a blue state. You typically are going to see more liberal judges.
This guy was a Biden appointee, the judge.
There you go. That's a perfect reason that you might see a Trump being much more um, in tune to the situation. My experience is that President Trump has a very um, hard, very firm opinion on our appointees from our former president
Hmm.
and their judicial overreach. And I don't know if this judge has ruled on other cases that might have affected some of the president's executive actions. It very well could be that this judge has ruled on or had opinions on cases where President Trump was directly involved in.
Yeah,
And
I'm
that
not
could
sure.
set
I
the
don't know.
precedent for it.
So I think overall, right now, you're feeling like it's 50-50, or do you have?
I don't bet plays odds. I'm saying that depending upon the outcome and if there is a conviction, what he's convicted of will dictate the actions of the president or any possible actions of this administration. I think if he's convicted of a much more egregious charge,
Yeah.
it will make it much more challenging for the president to offer clemency. If he's convicted of a more frivolous charge, if there are any, or one that is not one of violence or something like that, then you might have a higher predisposition towards clemency.
He's not on trial for domestic violence because they had reached the statute
Right,
of
right,
limitations. They're using
right,
that to show the control within the RICO, but he's not on trial for violence.
right. No, I understand.
Yeah.
Um,
Although that's most of the evidence that they're using to show how he controlled the enterprise, allegedly.
Look, so we had a video surface years ago of President Trump on a bus back, when he was doing his television show, and Billy Bush doing the interview on a hot mic. And certainly there were all sorts of concerns about that. You have a situation now where Sean Combs is on video, absolutely, beating up a young lady. Now, without going into what happened behind the scenes or anything about that, there is public perception about that.
Hmm.
With President Trump, you saw public perception about how he handled that, hot mic situation. He overcame it. I mean, he overcame it in a stellar way. But when you have, video of something like that, it depending upon what he's convicted of, that might cause more consternation on the president's side. And keep in mind that the president also really uses his staff for this. He uses his chief of staff, Susie Wiles. He uses Alice Johnson, the pardon czar, and Ed Martin as the pardon attorney. While he does do a lot of things unilaterally, and he certainly did it as far as the J6 folks, now he's getting a lot more input from those around him. And again, depending upon a conviction, if one is rendered, and for what, I think will dictate if and what the president does.
Okay, so now shifting focuses, everybody also wants to know, do you think Donald Trump will ever pardon Joe Exotic?
I don't know much about this case other than what I've read.
Hmm.
I would not put anything past this president in a nonviolent offense, in a white collar manner. I think that he's become a very progressive president for clemency. From what I know about the matter, he would probably stand a better chance at clemency, depending upon the outcome of Sean Combs, than maybe a Combs would.
Mm.
Um,
Did you hear that,
but it,
Joe? Joe, if you're listening, there's hope.
there's always hope for clemency. I always tell people, if you don't try, you're never going to get it.
Well, Joe
But you
tries
have to.
every single day. He's online posting memes. He's making his face into Trump's face combined. Every day he's like, I love you, Donald Trump. And He's tagging senators, he's tagging influencers, he's trying to get Kim Kardashian's attention, but so far no luck. And he's starting to get really frustrated because Trump just did Larry Hoover, uh, NBA YoungBoy, and he's like, "Where's my pardon?"
Well, keep in mind, Larry Hoover, while he did get clemency, he has a state charge, so he's not getting out of prison. He might go from federal to state, but that might be going from, frying pan into the fire.
Oh, really? Yeah, because I know Kanye's been trying to free Larry Hoover for a while now.
He definitely got clemency in the federal system. But in Chicago or in Illinois, which is where his state charges are, he's going, to go to prison there for quite some time. And it's my understanding he's not being offered clemency in Illinois.
So he'll go to state prison then.
Yes, yes,
Sorry, yeah, if you're
which is a
listening.
lot worse than federal in many instances.
The state prison.
Absolutely, any state facility tends to be much, much worse than federal.
So, can you guess where I'm from in this country? It's got one of the worst prisons in the country.
The worst is probably Louisiana.
Mm.
California has a fair number of them. Alabama, your southern states tend to have the worst.
In upstate New
Uh,
York.
Attica,
So
interesting.
I'm from Attica. So my grandparents worked at the prison when the riots happened. And
Uh,
do you know anything about that prison? Because there was like a
I
lot,
know.
there's a lot of strikes happening. You have any clients that you've worked with at that one?
So I work very closely and very friendly with the number one state consultant in the country, who actually happens also be Louis Mangione's consultant. Um, and he also knows New York system front and back. He was in the New York system for a brief period of time. Um, I have nothing but the utmost respect for him, and I think he's probably the best certain state consultant in the country.
Wow. So can we talk about the Luigi case?
I can't. I don't represent him.
Okay.
I can't give you any insight into him. It's not my place to talk about him at all.
Let's talk about some of the people you have represented because you have a pretty big resume. One being Sam.
I consulted with him and his family. Uh, I haven't spoken to them in quite some time. I know he's out in the terminal island in California, where I have four or five other clients. And then I've worked with a number of people in the crypto space, a number of political figures. My practice really does run the gamut. It is 99% white collar offenders.
That's why your nickname is the white collar advisor.
Well, that's what I do. I mean,
Yeah.
I, if somebody said
We
to
can
me,
talk about the crypto crimes. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
if somebody said to me, would I be willing to consult on Sean Combs? My thought process would be, depending upon what he's convicted for or convicted on, and if he is convicted on more serious charges, my only advice and help for him would be to try to get him to the safest possible USP, United States Penitentiary, where he will be able to live, not have any modicum of decent life, not have, if you're convicted of a serious offense like that, I would only, and I have two clients that are sentenced to life. Their families retain them, serious sex charges, and they got life sentences. One is a young man in his 20s. The best I can do is get them to a safe place where they can live, like a USP Tucson, which is known for having a big SOW, sexual offender yard, where
Mm.
they will be safe. Because if you're convicted of that kind of charge and you might have a life sentence or a long sentence, you're going to be extorted. I don't care who you are. There are people in prisons like that. They don't care who you are. You're a number and you're there for a long period of time. Give me money to stay safe.
So
Give
how
me
do
money
you
for
help them?
commissary.
How do you help them get to a safer spot?
So I would work with the Bureau of Prisons and their counsel, both before sentencing and after, to try to get them to the best possible facility where they have the best chance of survival. They can have visits with their family. Because really, if you're there for an extended sentence or what could be a life sentence, what do you want? You want your family to be able to visit you and see you.
Hmm.
You want to live. It's not a good existence by any means, but the only thing you have left is your family. Is a visit from to see your family. if you go to a facility that you're extorted terribly, or there's violence, and most of the facility high security facilities are violent, have violent offenders. They're there for life. They have nothing to lose by hurting someone.
Right.
They're already there for life. So they're going to extort you. I would want to get him to a facility that, yes, he's with other sexual offenders, but at least he'll live. So he could have visits from his children and his family. That's the most I could offer him.
So, do you feel like that, say like you get a sentence, like you're in prison for life. Is there any good thing about prison? Like, do you feel like there's any benefits of living in prison versus the real world?
No,
Not
there
one.
is. I've met
Like
people that
you
are
become closer
institutional.
to God, maybe.
Join a church. I've met people that, well, when you're in prison for a long time, you become institutionalized. You consider your cell or your pod area your house.
Hmm.
When people come into your cell or your pod area, you have a little towel in the front. You make them take off their shoes.
Mm.
The mindset of someone that is incarcerated for a long time, yet alone a life sentence, is dramatically different than my client that they're there for a year, 6 months, 3 years, 5 years. They know they're going home. I prepare them to get out as quickly as possible. That's my job. Get them to the best place. My clients go to camps. There are no fences. There are no cells. There are no guard towers. When you're going to a higher level security, you prepare somebody much differently. When you're going to somebody who's going for life, it's hard to prepare them for that other than preparing their family. My job in a situation like that is to work with their family
Mhm.
because they're the ones that have to prepare for life without that person. And that's hard.
Do you think then some of them would just prefer the death penalty than having to live in a prison the rest of their life?
I've never met a client. I've only had a handful of clients who've gotten 20, 30 year life sentences. Not one of them has said, I wish I would get the death penalty. Not one of them. These are all high. Sean Combs is an extremely intelligent man. He's extremely talented. He didn't get to where he was in life by being a street thug. He just didn't. He has common sense. He has street smarts. Very well educated. He is not the kind of person, in my opinion, I've never met him, to throw his arms up and say, "Just give me an injection." No.
No,
Um,
he's fighting out there.
Right. So I believe that when he's in prison, he will continue to fight. He'll exhaust every minute, every appellate opportunity he has. He will continue to fight for clemency because that's what fighters do, and I believe that's what he will do.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I guess I don't know. I don't know how they don't tell us how much many years he's gonna get. They don't it hasn't been clear since the trial began. Like they're like, well, he could get 10 here, 5 here, but people are predicting like 5 to 10 right now.
So I think there's some, depending upon the charge, there's statutory mandatory minimums. So one charge might carry 15 years mandatory minimum. Other charge might carry life. RICO obviously carries a much longer term. So depending upon what charge, if he's convicted, what charge he's convicted of, have what's called guideline ranges. So in the federal system, there's points, and everything is valued by points. It's the weight of drugs, the amount of money you stole, or the charge itself. So depending upon what, if he's convicted and what he's convicted of, has a guideline range. The guideline range might be 15 to 20 years, might be 30 to life. We don't know because he hasn't been convicted of anything. If he's convicted of anything, then it's up to the judge to determine based upon a number of factors, his pre-sentence interview, uh, uh, what's called 3553. So memos that his attorney writes for downward departures, letters that character letters. If he has any sort of contrition, acceptance of responsibility, depending upon what happens prior to sentencing, it gives the judge the latitude to say, here's what the United States Sentencing Commission says the range should be,
Mm.
but the judge unilaterally is allowed to deviate higher or lower.
So who's the guy that's gonna decide where he goes to like which prison
Uh,
he goes to?
well, depending upon if he's working with anyone, obviously a judge can make a recommendation for where you go, and a judicial recommendation is followed about 75% of the time. Ultimately, it's up to Grand Prairie, Texas, which is the National Designation Center
Okay.
for the Bureau of Prisons, where someone goes based upon the security, custody level, security level, and classification. Do they need programming? If they're a sexual offender, what facilities have sexual offenders? Where will he be the safest? Where does his family live? So there's a lot of different factors that goes into designation of any defendant.
We have about 3 minutes left on the Zoom. Do you think there's anything else that we should cover that we haven't yet?
I think that,
I'm gonna put these in like clips and then I'll do a
yeah,
long one too.
I'm a glass half full person. So I'm the eternal optimist. I think his defense team is excellent. He has probably the best defense team, in my opinion, in many ways in the country.
100%.
Um, and I think, from what I know about Mark Agnifilo, they're great attorneys. Um, if anybody can help him, it would be these attorneys. The problem is you're dealing with 12 men and women that at the end of the day want to end this and get back to their lives. And unfortunately, our criminal defense system, sometimes the jury doesn't make the best decision. They make the most hasty decision, the quickest decision.
Just to get out of
Um,
there.
yes, to get back to their lives.
No one's been
And
talking about that. Yeah. We've been thinking they're
mm,
gonna be like arguing and debating in that room, but what if they're just like done in 10 minutes?
it could be, but if they are arguing, debating, depending upon how contentious it could be, and I think you just saw it in the case of Lori in Massachusetts, who they had a very contentious jury. Many times the juries, if they have one jury who feels that the person's innocent, and the other jurors feel they're guilty, eventually that juror just might cave because it's easier to cave, not because that their conviction is any less, but because it's easier to cave. They want to get back to their lives. So in many ways, the jurors, they're very unpredictable.
A hundred
And
percent. We can't, we're not mind readers either. Everyone's like, what do you think's gonna happen? I don't know.
no,
I look at the jury, I can't tell.
you can never know. You never know. And obviously the attorneys went through the whole voir dire process to eliminate jurors to the best of their ability. You never know. Did something happen traumatic in the juror's past? Was there abuse in the juror's family? Did it happen since the trial started? So there's all sorts of things that are out of the defense and the attorney's control,
Right.
and that's where it gets kind of challenging.
Well, Sam, I think you were great. I think maybe you can come on again after he gets convicted and see what you
Well,
think.
hopefully he doesn't get
If,
convicted.
yeah.
If he gets convicted,
If he does,
then
yeah. If
I'd
he
be more
doesn't,
than happy to come on.
if he doesn't, I don't have to ever talk to you again.
There you go.
Well, thank you so
But
much for your time. And how can everybody find you?
just Google my name, Sam Mangel, Mangel. I am all over the internet. I used to tell people, my kids were always worried before I went into this.
I think you have
People
20
used to
seconds
Google me.
left.
Just Google me. I'm pretty
And
well known.
hopefully you don't have to call him, you guys.
Yes, I'm the person you never want to call.